Rachel Hatch. I am Program Officer for Community Vitality with the McConnell Foundation here in Reading, and I want to thank you for taking time tonight to spend a little while with us. I'll just check. Alan, can you hear us midway back? Can you give it? Okay, thumbs up. Thank you. So I want to begin by asking a question, and this is a question about the future of Reading. What if we got more people living downtown? What would it have been like tonight if you had left from a house in downtown to come here? If you're a business owner, what if you had hundreds more people living nearby? What if we got more people living downtown? This is a question that our team from the McConnell Foundation, from K2, from CRDC, and with support from the City of Reading's staff, we've been exploring this question for the past couple of years. And tonight, I just wanted to start by acknowledging that this question provokes a lot of hopes for the future, and it also provokes some fears about what that would be like, what is to come. In November of 2017, we asked about 130 community members who showed up to a project meeting about, what if we got more people living downtown? And we asked them, what are your hopes and fears? If you let yourself hope, what do you hope for this? If you're honest, what do you fear about this? So some of them are up here, but I just wanted to share a quick selection, because I think it's real. If I'm honest, my fear is that this project will go underutilized and just be another iteration of failure in Reading's downtown saga. If I'm honest, my fear is that we will build a downtown for 2020 and not 2040. We need to think bigger than we are now. A couple of hopes. This person's very efficient with what they wrote. Walkable, bikeable, more secure, more economic vitality, welcoming to visitors from outside of the area. And the last hope, if I let myself hope, my hope is that streetscapes are created that encourage walk and biking, that parking is adequate but not dominant, that housing leads to an active downtown, and that we create a downtown that we are proud of. So there's a whole range of human experience that we all bring to this. I was talking with somebody who was a very early arriver today and heard the stories of the Golden Eagle Hotel that he remembers on the site of the former parking structure. And just family memories, memories of being born at the hospital downtown. I think he said it was called Memorial Hospital at one time. And there's a whole lot that we all bring to this, some who are newer to Reading, some who are multiple generations here. So I just want to begin by acknowledging that we're all bringing that into this very crowded room. And thank you for showing up. Quick sense of who is in the room. So I want to ask, and even those of you in the back, I can see you, some tippy-toe people back there. And hopefully you can see on the video screen, you'll be able to see the slides. So quick question of who's in the room. Is anybody in the room, and you would consider yourself someone who lives downtown? You're a resident. I see my Lorenz friends right up here. Can you raise your hand just so we can see? Garden tract by extension, okay. Okay, thank you. What about those who have a adjacent business somewhere in this downtown? You're a business owner, you work at business downtown. Cool, quite a few. And then what about if you work at another organization that's downtown, so you come downtown for that? Okay, nonprofit sector and others. Okay, we got Wendy with that one, good.
Does coming downtown for drinks count?
Okay, that's what I'm gonna ask next. So who likes to play in downtown? Okay. There's some trippy waves going on right now. Okay. That helps just to give a sense of who's here, who our neighbors are who are here tonight. So what we want to cover with our time that we have is really what to expect. And this is a focus on the next months that are ahead of us. The next 6 months is what we really want to focus on between now and March of 2020. And there's one downtown business owner, Suzanne Russell from Carousel. I was talking with her a couple weeks ago, and she said, you know, you need to understand that people just need to know what to expect and when and why. And so that's the goal of what we want to cover together tonight. So just to start, I know some of you are familiar with the McCollum Foundation, but for those who aren't, we're a private philanthropic foundation, in our 31st year this year. Our mission is to help build better communities through philanthropy, and we do that across 5 different counties in far northern California. So we're based here at home in Redding and Shasta County, but we're also in Siskiyou, Trinity, Tehama, and Modoc counties. And you may be familiar with some of the projects that we've done across the community. We kind of are an odd duck for foundations in the sense that we have actually developed things, that there is, you know, this longitudinal experience with developing projects, some of which you may know, like the Sundial Bridge, Reading School of the Arts, Sheraton Hotel, others. So this is sort of in the DNA. And a couple years ago, our board of directors decided that they really thought the time was right to make a 10-year commitment to downtown Reading revitalization efforts. And that 10 years, I feel like, is really important because there are lots of changes that are complex and a lot of life issues that are interconnected, and so it's important to take a really systematic approach with a 10-year runway. When we started that 10-year view, one of the very first things that came clear to us is that we have a 9-to-1 jobs to housing ratio in our downtown. And for those of you who send me text messages from whatever cool city you're in, somewhere else, most of those cities have more like a 2-to-1 jobs to housing ratio. So we have some ground to cover to get to that bustling feel in the city center. You know, a lot of us live here or moved here because we like the lakes or the mountains, or you know, we have a farm or whatever it may be, a ranch. But in the city center, that's where you really want to look for that bustling activity. And that's where we saw we had a ways to go. And of course that was pre-car fire, so we know that we lost, you know, 1,000 housing units in the overall supply, not in downtown, but in the overall supply. So this need for housing has only gotten more prescient in that time period. So this is the project site. I'm going to kind of get down to business, okay? So this is the project site that's located in our downtown core. You can see, just orienting, we've got the downtown, the dark line is drawn around the core of the core. And when we thought, well, if we need to get more people living downtown, where should they be? At the center of downtown. And so that's one of the reasons why we started to look at this site that we'll talk about tonight. You can see, let me just pause here. You can see that there are lots and lots and lots of neighbors along this site. So some of you who have raised your hand for business owners, or you work in a downtown nonprofit, you may have a very specific question about, you know, what's going to happen on the corner of this and that, and when. So those we want to engage with you on, but for the sake of everybody in the room, we have a clipboard that my colleague Shannon Phillips has been passing around to ask you that if you have a really site-specific question, that you please leave us your name and your contact info and just a note so that we can follow up with you individually afterwards. So what we want to cover is kind of the stuff that's going to be the most relevant to the most people. So here's the existing conditions of the site. Some of you probably parked there this evening when you came here. And if you did, you may also have observed that this is an aging parking structure. You know, it was built in a couple of phases, and when you look at the lifespans of parking structures and the maintenance equation with all of it, we've just kind of reached a point where something creative needed to happen on that site. So we know that something needed to be done and wanted to look at proposing this project site there. But we didn't know if we could pull it off in terms of actually making a project feasible there, especially a housing project and a mixed-use development. But we were lucky that we hustled. The K2 team, CRDC, City of Reading, and the McCollum Foundation teamed up in a collaborative effort to go after state grant funding. And here I should just say, when I went to work for a private foundation, I thought I'd be grant making, and then all of a sudden it's like he's poring over the grant applications, and so it's good for empathy for me. So $24 million for this project in downtown was the result of that successful application. This was the highest scoring project in its category across the whole state, so it feels good to be winning. And you know, we feel proud because this, you know, in this statewide arena, we really together were able to represent the North State well. There were 53 applications, you know, people that actually crossed the finish line to submitting, hitting the submit button. 19 of those were selected, and only 2 of those were north of San Francisco. Not even north of Sacramento, but north of San Francisco. So we were in a hot and heavy race with a lot of other communities, and we were pleased that this was the spark that could really start this potentially becoming a reality. For those of you who geek out about funding sources, because I know I've seen some of you asking me questions on Facebook. So there are 2 funding sources that were part of this initial grant allocation. The Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Grant was the $20 million, and the Infill Infrastructure Grant. And these come under the umbrella of the California Climate Investments. So it's trying to make communities more bikeable, more walkable, and really ready for the future. So you can see our project team, we were awarded the grant in June of 2018. So we started this process, you know, years before and arrived at that key milestone. High level of what's funded. So this is a net zero mixed use development, and some of you on Facebook have been asking questions about is this going to be an environmentally sustainable building? How will that work in a downtown context? And we're really pleased to say that it will be net zero, so you've probably seen some solar panels in some of the initial images. It will have parking spaces, and trust me, we will be talking about that this evening. Urban greening components, and we're really pleased that we're working with Olin Studio, which is a landscape architecture firm out of Philadelphia. Really impressed with their early work, which we haven't even gotten to share with you because it's, you know, midstream. And then more than 2 miles of bicycle and pedestrian improvements that will start to connect, you know, if you picture going from Turtle Bay, the Sundial Bridge, the Sheraton area, Civic, Shasta EDC area, into downtown, and then being able to have a downtown experience, come back up the Diesel Horse to downtown to the River Trail and come back over. That's what actually is going to be possible. Thanks to the grant that K2 successfully achieved, there's 2 miles there and another 2 miles through this project. So that really creates a downtown loop. That's an experience that we haven't had yet and we can't quite imagine, but it's coming, and that's a really exciting component. And then there's also funding for some programming, including a bike share program and some cycling encouragement programming. Because right now, not everybody here feels like safe and invited to cycle in the downtown area. You might feel like, I'm about to die, actually. Let me get out of this alleyway. Maybe it's just me. So you know, with bikeways, we know it's like if you build it, they will not necessarily automatically come. We have to make it safe, inviting, and we have to be able to see other people out there doing that same thing that we hope will grow. So here's just an overhead view of what this site looks like, and I want to walk down the development because some of you have questions about like what's happening where. So this is just the high level view. And I'll just come over to start. So first, just orient, like, where are you in space? We're at the northern end of the current parking structure in this view. So there's Tehama Street going east-west, and then California Street going north-south. We're all there in our heads? Okay. And if you start at the front, there's a multi-story commercial development. We know that we need to have the right mix of offices, retail, residents, restaurants in downtown for those who like to play downtown. And so that original commercial space will be complemented by the rest of the project. So we have multi-story parking, which we'll talk about tonight. And then a mix of housing units. Long term, I think I can speak on behalf of the McConnell Foundation team to say that we believe there needs to be market rate housing in downtown, because we need people who want to spend money, and they want to go to Damburger like 3 days a week. They want to come here for a beer, and that's, long term. We really need that. If you take any market study right now, though, it does not suggest that that would be a good idea from a feasibility standpoint. So starting with a smallish number of units that we can actually put in the market, watch what they do, and hopefully it'll be a signal as things come along that other things are possible. And then also affordable units, and so really this makes up a mixed income development. If there are any policy wonks out there, you may have seen the state of California is doing all kinds of legislation about housing, and that's given us some more tools to be able to experiment with different models for how many market rate units, how many affordable, at what levels. So just to be transparent that that's a process that's external to our decision making, but we're tracking what's happening with it and making some adjustments based on what we think we can do to make the healthiest mix for that building. And I should mention that underneath the primarily affordable housing units that will be here, that is where there's also going to be some additional parking. Our architects from Modus and DMARC got really creative. They looked at the grade changes along that area, and they were able to tuck in some additional parking under there as well. If you haven't seen this vision before of Market Street being reintroduced, that's something that's also coming, and that's part of the K2 project at the site of the former Dickers building. So, I hear from a lot of people about their experiences of Market Street at different stages in evolution, with the before the mall, after the mall roof came off, all of those iterations. The moment that we're in now is really an opportunity to better connect some of that area that's just been disconnected, that's been islanded. So we're excited to see that. And then you may also notice that there's, at the Shasta College campus, a park-like amenity that we're working on developing adjacent to that project. And I will just say a word about this, and we have Kevin O'Rourke from Shasta College over here as well, that we're excited that we've been in conversation with Shasta College and with their board about the potential of there being an anchor tenant in the commercial space, expanding their footprint into downtown. You think of some of the community-facing functions of a community college, it would be great to see more of that in downtown. We've got this kind of economic development nexus that's just emerged in the last year or so, starting really with the chamber moving downtown. We have Smart Business Resource Center. We have Visit Reading has now moved downtown, the Women's Business Center. This is, a great coffee shop collision in the making for some really good things to actually tumble out, and that Shasta College will likely be a part of that is really exciting to us. Are there any Shasta College students or faculty here tonight who spend time at the downtown campus? Yes? Yes? You're like a little shy about that? Not shy. So one of the handouts, which we have as a resource that's available up at the front here, spells out, thank you Zach Bonin, I see you're grabbing those, spells out some of what the college is looking at doing specifically for students at the downtown campus, students, faculty, staff. And one of the things you'll see if you take a close look at this is that they have said an additional campus safety officer will be assigned to the downtown campus during the morning and evening hours in order to provide safe walks during key times. And I'm imagining these will be contingent on what you see as the demand time. 6 to 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 9:30 would be the start hours for that. And if anybody's interested in this topic, Lonnie, can you raise your hand over here? Okay, so we have the Shasta College campus safety lead here for anybody who has questions about that. Thank you for being here. We also, you may have seen this already, but just in case you haven't, the City of Reading has put out a downtown parking strategy. And you can see it at this URL, which is handy to remember. So cityofreading.com/downtown. And the purpose of the strategy is they've laid it out, and some of you have found the copies of it that are strewn about the room, so you can reference those. But it's really to think about how to make the most efficient use of the parking supply in downtown Reading, to learn from other communities about best practices for how they approach it, and then to eventually pave the way for trying to think through specific tools that could come to bear in downtown Reading. So I just commend that to you, especially if you like to geek out about policy documents. Okay, I shared the overhead view of the buildings, but this is kind of like the other set of this other side of things, which is the urban greening elements and the streetscapes that will start to really feel more inviting. When we did a survey a couple years ago, we asked, what's the most important thing for cooling people? It's hot in this room, by the way. Okay, for cooling people down when they're walking in downtown streetscapes, and we heard shade trees. Above misters and everything else, shade trees was the #1 response that we heard. So these are the spaces that Olin, our landscape architect, is specifically looking at programming and designing for. We've heard the term bump spaces, that bump spaces are important to downtown, meaning you go outside of your business, you're walking to lunch or whatever you might be doing if you spend a lot of time downtown, and who do you encounter along the way, and how does that actually amplify your experience? And you don't really encounter people if you're in a place that you want to move through as quickly as possible. So these green spaces are meant to provide moments for interaction, and even for some just hangout spaces where you might, Smart Business Resource Center and the chamber might actually bump into each other and be able to have a conversation in these spaces. And I will talk a little bit more about the alleyway in a moment, but just to say, we're really looking at this public alley as something that's integral to the overall design process. So the alleyway will give back about 13 feet into the public right-of-way. So if you can close your eyes and picture that alley today, it will actually be a much broader experience and more inviting for pedestrians and for cars alike. So we're excited about that component. The project also includes cycle track elements, and this is that downtown loop that I was talking about, where you can actually imagine getting from point A to point B and having some of those connections closed. This cycle track, this is the way we proposed it at the time of our application for our grant, which is the source of funding for these 2 additional miles. And the City of Reading will work through ultimately all the design and ultimate configuration. But this gives a sense of the type of experience that we want to invite people into. There are a lot of people who are like the daredevil bicyclists in downtown right now, and what we really want is to create a more inviting experience for a family with kids, somebody who may have a bike in their garage that they haven't been on in a while, but they would love to go from say the Sheraton to downtown to a restaurant and back again. So designing something that is inviting for those people is a priority of this. Okay, so we're back to the existing site. And now I want to walk through just a little bit more of what to expect. This site, is a centralized parking structure. So we've all trained ourselves for many years to, if you're going into downtown, if you're going to the Cascade, if you're going to a restaurant that's anywhere close to the parking structure, we've all trained ourselves to go to this one centralized spot. And the way I would describe the shift that is happening in downtown is that it's like going from centralized to distributed parking. So more spots that are smaller, that are distributed around the community, which are still close to some amenities, but there's a critical thing, which is that you have to know where they are, or else you won't know that they would be handy to actually use. So that's really the shift that's underway and the steps that we need to take coming up. We've been tracking examples from outside of this community. These people look more pleased to be riding on this shuttle than I feel like they should. But it's like, I don't know, someone told a joke, but they, so the City of Reading and a few community partners are actively exploring what would it take to have a shuttle. If we're going from centralized to distributed parking, there might be a need to get between some of those distributed parking spots. So the thing that the city is exploring and that we're also really watching with interest is, could it work to have a shuttle, perhaps that would go certain peak hours of the day, on a loop between certain key locations. And so the city is hard at work at researching that together with between different departments. We know that this won't be likely to happen unless there's some form of community help or some grant funding that comes into play. So that's something that we're internalizing and thinking through for what that might mean for downtown Reading. And it certainly is something that when you go to other places and you see it, you figure, okay, that works. I can see how that would be. So that's one of the things we're learning, to explore shuttle options. Another thing we're learning in the category of oh duh is clear signage is critical for parking in downtown. And one person recently described it to me as, downtown feels like parking anarchy. Like, do I have a permit? Is there a head on that meter? What is this? And so it's, that's just where we're at right now. And there's an opportunity to move towards clear signage so that if you're, driving down the street and you're going to X, Y, or Z business or restaurant, you can say, oh, I see where I'm actually supposed to go. That would be an option. And the city has just begun the early stages of installing some of this. I don't know if anybody has seen these already. These are along Pine Street. But pointing to lots that many of us have passed by for a while now, because it's like, does someone own that? Do I need this elusive permit to be able to park there? And so in fact, there are some parking resources that we just don't actually even know about. So we're learning clear signage is important. And then we're also learning that accessibility is going to be important. There are people who live in downtown and who come to downtown who have a wide range of mobility, and that's just a reality in life. And this is not some shiny, happy future just for the people who want to bike to the dam and back or something. This needs to be something that's going to be accessible to the whole community. And so that's another thing that we're learning. I want to just pause here and ask, Sheila Hurst, are you here somewhere? Okay, good. So I think of the Foundry Square as a prime example. You guys know where we're at, okay. So Foundry Square as a prime example of a business, set of businesses that have a parking lot that are associated with that. And you go through like hitting your head against the wall of how many signs can we put up that would indicate this parking is for these businesses only, so that there can actually be patronage of those businesses close by. So this is a just question that we want to keep exploring around how private parking lots that are going to be accessible to businesses in downtown will get governed, and particularly what the signage would be for that. And so we wanted to actually do a quick show of hands of, is there anybody else in the room tonight who owns a private parking lot? Who we want to mention? Angie? And in the back, Marge? Okay, over here, where's your lot? Market Street Steakhouse, okay, behind, got it. And back here, you got Sherman Square. So Steve Vade, are you buried? Okay, we have a sign-in sheet. Can everybody look at Steve Vade for a second? City of Reading, Downtown Liaison. So Steve has in his possession a sign-in sheet for anybody who has a private lot and especially wants to engage in a conversation about how should they be signed, could it be uniform so that's not confusing and more parking anarchy. Sheila Hurst has been leading some of that conversation locally, and we want to have the next installment of really gaining clarity about that. So is it okay if I say, go see Sheila afterwards if you're interested, and please sign up with Steve Vague at the back. One more wave. Yep, there he is. Okay. So we're also learning about the importance of making underutilized spaces available. Here's an example of what you see right now at the corner of, Pine Street and Tehama, the northeast corner of that. Shasta Regional Medical Center has a lot that's there. And again, I think people often feel like, can I park there? Is that for me? What is that? And so the city, and particularly Steve Bade, have been hard at work in having early conversations with different owners of lots to see whether it would be possible for use to be made of those lots, that they're underutilized today, but they could be more efficiently utilized. So that's one example. I understand that there are also conversations with some of the banks in particular that are on the southern end, because you know, it matters where does parking get distributed to, and the southern end needs some love, and so we want to figure out where there could be different lots that the city might be able to have license agreements or lease agreements with for some of those banks, etc. So that's a no-brainer that we've been starting to learn from different communities. I'm not going to go into the parking strategy. I see some eyes glossing over right now, so I'm glazing over right now. So I'm not going to go to the whole parking strategy that the city has put out. They can speak to it better than I can. But just wanted to note that there are people who are very carefully watching the exact counts. How many spaces are going away? How many are coming back? Where are there places where counterintuitively we're like gaining and losing? And it's all about the sequencing. What this image shows is, you know, if you think about where we're at right now, this is today, 1554 spaces. We're at a 65% utilization rate based on the city's studies. And then we're gonna go through some things, right? You can see visually represented here. And so there's, you know, some parking spaces that are lost for new projects, ranging from, you know, think of the courthouse, for instance, and 1551 Market Street, and so on. So you can see where there's loss of them, but also where some new additional supply is coming online. And one of the things that the McConnell Foundation has been interested in particular is that we wanted to offer some public parking at the site of the former police station, and so that's, you know, 1 block north of the northern end of the parking structure. So that's an example of additional supply. This is in the printed material, so if you really want to take a closer look, we're on the city's website. But you can see, you know, this is the experience that we can expect. And then we end with, we're targeting just about 40 spaces of total net loss. I'm pretty optimistic we're going to get better than that because we keep getting creative everywhere we can across the downtown. But this is the levels, and I feel like it's important just to communicate, you know, in a forthright way. Here's what it looks like at the moment. I wanted to just take a moment. We have some team members here from SDS. Where's my SDS people? You're okay? Yep. And then also from Modern Builders, who are our contractors on the project. They're probably hiding back there somewhere. And I just have to pause and say it's been a really awesome experience working with Modern. So far, they're based in Chico. And, you know, the contractors are people who, you know, really make a difference to the life of the project on a daily basis. And so the kind of dream team, and there are more, we just chose these 3 folks who are working closely on it as examples, are, I think, going to be a really important piece of the puzzle for how we navigate all of this as well. And I just wanted to share that this fellow who you see in the middle here, who's back probably somewhat shy, was actually one of the team that worked on the McConnell Foundation headquarters years ago. So if any of you have been there to our main building, and it's so cool, Mr. Shoup, to know that you're coming around to, you know, this stage in your career and working on a project like this. So I just wanted you to see a couple of the faces of some of the team members. So we've been working with Modern Builders, with our architect team, and really approaching a specific plan for what phased demolition could look like. And so that's the meat of what I want to share with you tonight. And we begin with phase 1. So first of all, you should know this is a multi-phase process. So phase 1 would begin on the northern end of the parking structure. So just to reorient again, we're at Tehama on this side, California here. And that's the phase that would begin this fall. We're targeting November, early November, November 5th for that. Phase 2, we are looking at next year, March or so of 2020. And you know, one of the things that we've learned just by talking to different downtowners is that the holiday quarter, quarter 4, is really important to businesses. And so we've heard, okay, is there any way, we know this is coming, is there any way that it can go after the holiday season? And so we put kind of the impossible task to our team from Modern and our architect team at SDS to say, what can happen? And we're really pleased that they were able to get creative and to be able to phase this, because it's good to have time to absorb change as it happens. There's also utility improvements that we'll talk about in a moment. So this is kind of the main image you might want to percolate on as you think about this. And now I'll go step by step, a little more detail. So one of the very first things that needs to happen is that there are some things that are in the parking structure or on the parking structure that we need to take good care of. The city of Reading, I understand, is in the process or has been taking some of the plaques off that memorialize, the redevelopment agency and some of those key moments in the history of that spot. But we also need to liaise with my new friend from the U.S. Postal Service about the mail pickups. That some of you who are downtown businesses, you might nod that there are mail pickups that are there. So that needs to be handled with care. Where's the appropriate place for those to go that are actually in the parking structure? We also are working with the Shasta Historical Society to document the murals that you can see just right outside the door here and then wrapping around California Street. I pictured there are real people who were artists who put time and care into those things. And so what we plan to do is to have a professional photographer, snap those shots and then to submit them as part of the archives through the Shasta Historical Society. So some work to do just in the course of the next month to take seriously what that means for people who are there every day. Phase 1 demo I mentioned, anticipated to begin November 5th. And just to note that north of that first phase of demolition, so you see the phase in the purple, just north of there in the green are the additional parking spaces that are most close by that have been brought on. That's at the Reading Area Bus Authority lot, which used to be a fenced-off parking lot. Do you remember that, driving by and you just see, wonder why that is? So now it's not fenced anymore, so you can park there. And also just north of the parking structure where the former police station is, additional supply as well. So think of this as phase 1. This is, real and happening this fall. Phase 2 then gets to the southern end and anticipated for March of 2020. Then we would make it our priority for the new parking structure, the multi-story parking structure that's on the northern end, indicated here in green, for that to go up first. So there are, you saw the multiple components. There's a commercial and the parking. So the multi-story parking structure, we would undertake that work first. I'm going to be honest with you, that takes time, and so it's not as though it's going to perfectly line up. But we know we have heard what the priority needs to be, and we know that that's what we want to pursue first. And then the next step, we're targeting June of 2020 to have the southern portion paved for surface level parking. So it won't be multi-story parking. You may have heard that multi-story parking spaces actually cost between $30,000 and $50,000 a space to build. It will be surface parking and for a transitional period. And that we know will start to even out some of the experience. So there's a crunch period in there, leading then into the interim parking. Some questions we've gotten from businesses that are located around the alleyway. They say, well, what happens during the alleyway, in the alleyway during construction? So we have plans to widen the alleyway, I mentioned by 13 feet, upgrade the utilities, which any of our public works people here know that that's critical. If you're going to open up things, you got to upgrade them at the same time. Maintain access for drop-offs and trash pickups. Trash runs the world, actually, right? So it's important to keep that going and to have access for drop-offs, and then a plan to have some scaffolding to keep people safe. Safe construction site is important to us. A few more things that we're learning. We have been studying examples of fence treatments in different places. This may seem like a really lame detail to share, but it's actually vital to the experience of being in a construction area. And so we're learning about how the aesthetics of that experience are important and that they shape, all of our expectations about what's to come. They're also a surface for communication, so an opportunity to change out some updates about the project as we go during the course of time. So a couple people have asked us about where we're at in the design process. This is something that, unless you're a builder or an architect or you've developed things, it may be newer. So we go through the early stages of due diligence, schematic design, then we hit about the stage that we're at right now. So we're at about 50% design development. We'll go eventually to 100% design development and then construction drawings, building. So we've made a lot of progress, but we still have a long ways to go as well in terms of the next steps in that. And I want to share just a couple of the images that Modus and DMARC have put together, some of the renderings at this phase. Here you see along California Street some of the retail spaces. And I want to address this because we've gotten some questions about, well, what retail is going to go in? And is it going to be this or that type of store? One of the things that we're learning in the early process is that it's going to be important for us to right size our retail environment in downtown. We have some vacancy in our downtown already, as those of you know who hang out down here. And we want to look at what's kind of some minimum viable size of retail spaces that could allow for people who are fledgling businesses but have something that they're really working toward that's viable to be able to maintain some local flavor in these spots. So here's one view along California Street. You can see the paving for surface level parking down below. Here's a view from California and Tehama, so this intersection. The northern commercial space, which is really the northern tower, where it's anticipated that we'd have a Shasta College presence. And here's an image that comes from, so you're kind of looking south to north along California Street here. And so you can see some of the street grid that gets reintroduced, both along Butte and also Yuba streets. And then this set of units, which are primarily market rate units with a retail ribbon down below, inviting people in. Here's another image of one of those green spaces that are the spaces in between, which are really all important. And these would be spaces that, you picture living downtown, you're in an urban-ish environment, as much as we could call ourselves that. But you might still want to have, green space and that fresh air in your day. So some of these amenities are really designed to serve the residents of the housing primarily, but also we want them to be an appealing aspect for people passing by. Here's just one image from Olin, our landscape architects, as they're looking at how do the spaces that are in the California Market Street alley, for instance, how do those interface with the building? How do they interface with the park areas? So this is one of their early visuals of what that could look like. You can start to imagine wanting to hang out here. And then here's an aerial view of the early concepts that they're developing. So we want to just kind of pull back the veil and share where they're at right now around the potential of having a park that includes some boulder elements in it, some water elements in it, and there you see the California Market Street alley is that strip that's going kind of north to south, and then some of the plazas that are integrated more so into the housing structure itself. So there are lots more updates to come, and I was asked earlier by someone over here, well, how can I actually stay in the loop for what's happening next, because this is going to be an ongoing process that unfolds. And so I want to just invite you to go to this link if you're interested in staying in the loop on updates. We've been doing this about once a quarter, and we anticipate now it is time to increase the frequency of this set of updates. So bit.ly/downtown dispatch if you're interested. And there are some clipboards with sign-up sheets that are available around as well if you'd like to write your name and stuff on there. I wanted to ask two questions of you. You can see that you have some cards at your seat. And I want to take probably 3 minutes just to ask this first question, which is, how can we need your advice, how can we best communicate with the downtowners during the course of this process? So I just shared about one way, which is our e-newsletter, and I'm hoping you can take just a moment to write down what you feel would be something that would reach you, a channel that would reach you. And while you're starting at doing that, I just want to also call out the work that Enjoy magazine is doing. You may have seen in their most recent issue that they have a downtown kind of spotlight section, which is also giving project updates, and that will be monthly. That'll be a monthly feature going forward. So that's also just helpful for people maybe who they don't live and work in downtown, but they care about what happens in downtown. Okay, I'm gonna go quiet for a moment. Does everyone have a pen? People at the bar are like, give me that. This is about how can we best communicate with you. I'm talking to you on Facebook, you know we communicate. Okay, so what is the best, really we wanna know, what's the best way to reach you during the course of this process? Question has come up, can someone come talk to our group about this project? So I should just mention Kiwanis clubs, Rotary clubs, there are lots of clubs I didn't even know existed that we are happy to provide a project briefing and a chance to connect as well. So if that question is on your mind, you can put down your club that you especially would want. Okay, so it looks like you've got that. On the second card, I want to just return to the question of what are your hopes and your fears in this process. And here, hopefully you have a little bit more information about what to expect in the near term, in the next 6 months, but projects like this take time. So I wanted to just pause and ask, what are your hopes and your fears? And we'll give about 3 minutes for you to actually go heads down and do this. You have 2 cards. Yes? Okay. Give 1 more minute. Got a peanut gallery developing back there.
What? Okay. Yeah, we'll have the slideshow, and then yours, I've been looking over there and it's been red.
Okay, before I lose some of you, because you're interested in refilling, I want to just say a couple things. One is that I want to just identify, if you can give a wave, if our project team is still paying attention. The folks from K2, Daniel and Alan, are you within sight? Yes? Okay, so if you want to look back, there's Daniel and Alan from K2, our project partners with whom we've joined in this joint venture. for this project. They're going to be around because we want to be sure that we have a chance for, especially site-specific questions that we know you all have. Plenty of us want to be around and available for some of those. So Alan and Daniel, you saw Steve Bade earlier. We also have with us tonight Chuck Auckland from the City of Reading, Zach Bonin from the City of Reading, probably John Abshire, I saw you somewhere, there we go. And then we also have our Shasta College team, who's over here at this corner, so if you have specific questions about that. And then I'm joined here tonight also by Shannon Phillips, who is probably in the back end. And she's the one who has that clipboard with the site-specific questions that we want to connect with you about. So if you haven't had a chance to, please find her. And I also want to just say a big word of thanks to our team that put together this event. So Cedar Crest Brewing Company, our host. Can we give a hand for Kate? Market Street Steakhouse Chef Wes was our caterer, and then Netsound and Spero Pictures, who are, and especially thanks to you guys, because we know there are people who couldn't make it tonight. It's, you know, it's a pop-up event basically, and we wanted to provide the video recording for those who want to actually check in with this conversation. So I'm going to close here. We will all be around for further conversation, and I sincerely want to thank you for coming. There are more resources up here if there's any interest, including the Shasta College parking handout, downtown specific plan, and some of the history of what we've been hearing from the community so far as we move towards this project. I will be collecting, thank you, I will be collecting these. And so I'll come around to you, or you can leave them on your seat. And I want to just say again, thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you for the heart that you have for downtown Reading. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Feel free to get a refill, and we'll be around. Thank you.